So I want you to imagine walking into a grocery store just, a few years from now.
Okay, yeah.
You don't have a wallet on you. You don't even have a phone. You literally just walk through the sliding doors, grab your milk and your bread, and you just walk right back out.
Sounds pretty nice, honestly.
Right. It sounds like magic. But as you cross that threshold, there's this overhead scanner, and it reads the unique geometry of your face.
The biometrics.
Exactly. And instantly, an artificial intelligence cross-references that scan with your central bank digital currency account. It calculates your total, deducts the digital tokens, logs your purchase history, and even updates the store's inventory.
All in the background. You don't do a thing.
Exactly. It's perfectly frictionless. I mean, it's totally secure, and it is the ultimate convenience for you. And here's the big question. Let's say you just want to buy an apple.
Just one apple.
Yeah, one apple, but you want to do it without the government, the AI, or the bank knowing about it. How do you do it?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it?
Right. Like, is it even physically possible to survive outside of a system that is that completely integrated into our physical world?
That's actually the defining architectural question of the next 2 decades. Because we are looking at a future where a very significant population is going to stare at that ultra-convenient grocery store and decide, they want absolutely no part of it.
And that is exactly what we are doing a deep dive into today. We are unpacking a really fascinating, highly detailed academic paper by Michael R. Williams.
Right. It's titled Architectures of Refusal.
Yes. And the premise is wild, but it is just incredibly grounded. The whole paper outlines how to design a parallel financial and economic system for the future.
And he bases it entirely on the history of how people have successfully bypassed these strict financial regimes in the past.
Right, which is what makes it so real. He isn't just writing some science fiction manifesto here.
No, not at all. He actually approaches this as a strict comparative historical analysis.
Right.
He looks at 10 real-world episodes of financial upheaval, state repression, all these intense scenarios, and he dissects what actually kept people fed and housed when the formal systems completely failed them.
Or when the systems intentionally locked them out.
Exactly. And then he extrapolates those survival mechanics into a literal blueprint for the near future.
So our mission for this deep dive is to break down this blueprint for you. The paper calls the population that decides to opt out the resistant remnant.
Right, the remnant.
And for that group, the author proposes this massive, detailed framework for a parallel economy. He calls it the ROPE-FEIS framework.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll get into what that acronym means.
We will definitely break all of that down because our goal is to help you understand the raw mechanics of this proposed bifurcated future.
Yeah, because whether you plan to be first in line for that biometric grocery store or you want to be completely off the grid, you need to know this.
Or, let's be real, you'll probably find yourself trying to straddle the razor-thin line somewhere in the middle. But you still need to know how the plumbing of this new world actually works.
Definitely. But before we can talk about how to build the escape pod, we kind of have to understand the spaceship, right?
Okay, I love that analogy, the spaceship. The paper calls this overarching formal economy the ABCD system. Break that down for me. What exactly are we escaping from?
So the ABCD system describes an architecture that's consolidating around 4 mutually reinforcing pillars. Let's start with A.
A is for artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah. But we need to move past thinking of AI as just a chatbot that writes emails for you.
Right, it's way bigger than that.
In this context, AI is deeply integrated into compliance, risk scoring, automated transaction monitoring, and dynamic credit allocation.
So it's basically the ultimate surveillance engine.
Exactly. It monitors everything in real time. Then we have B, which is biometric digital identification.
And this is a huge shift from how we do things now.
Huge. Historically, you proved who you were with something you knew, like a PIN code, or something you possessed, like a piece of plastic.
Oh, a driver's license or a debit card.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But biometrics shift that authentication to inherence-based factors. Your identity becomes fundamentally tied to your physical body.
We're talking retina scans, gait analysis, vascular patterns. So I can't just hand my brother my debit card and tell him my PIA so he can go grab groceries for me.
No, you couldn't, because your brother's face won't authorize your money.
Wow. Okay, that's intense.
The transaction is hard-coded to the biological individual, and that leads directly to C, which is central bank digital currency, or CBDC.
Which people talk about a lot, but what is it really?
Well, major central banks are rapidly moving this from theoretical white papers into actual pilot programs. And a CBDC isn't just digital money like what you see in your banking app right now.
Right, it's not just a digital ledger of normal dollars.
No, it is programmable fiat money. It can have specific conditions attached to it regarding exactly where, when, and on what it can be spent.
Oh, wow. So the money itself has rules.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And finally, D stands for an integrated digital control infrastructure.
Wait, isn't infrastructure just the wires and the servers?
It is the physical hardware, sure, the internet cables, the point-of-sale terminals, smart city sensors, but the D here really represents the operational fusion of the first three pillars into that unified net.
Okay, I see. Having AI, having biometric scanners, and having programmable currency, those are all distinct technologies on their own.
Right, but the D is the merging of all those into a single technical substrate. Payments, identity, and behavioral conditioning all in one.
I think that fusion aspect is honestly the scariest part for me. Because for the last 10 years, we've seen these things developing in silos.
Yeah, completely separate industries.
Like tech companies were doing the biometrics, central banks were looking at CBDCs, and Silicon Valley was just pushing AI. But the paper emphasizes that their operational integration right now is what makes this moment historically unique.
You really can't just look at a digital currency in a vacuum anymore. You have to look at it paired with the AI compliance and the biometric identity.
But here's where I hit a wall with the author's premise, and maybe you can help me out here. If this ABCD system is so amazing and frictionless, why would it require a mandate?
What do you mean?
Well, like, if I invent an incredible new digital wallet and 50% of the country uses it just because they love it, I have a massively successful business. Why does the paper argue that this specific architecture naturally leans toward forced compliance?
Ah, okay. It comes down to the underlying logic of surveillance and programmable control. An ABCD system with only 60% adoption is fundamentally broken from the perspective of the people administering it.
Broken? How so?
It only yields 60% of its intended benefits. If your goal is total macroeconomic visibility or automated tax compliance or releasing stimulus funds conditionally, you can't have 40% of the population transacting in physical cash or decentralized digital tokens.
Right, because you can't track them.
Exactly. To realize its full technical potential, the system actually requires near universal coverage. We are talking 95% or higher.
Because the cost of monitoring that last 5% gets ridiculous.
Yes, the cost of monitoring the residual 5% who are inside the system is mathematically trivial for an AI. But the cost for a state trying to monitor an unbounded, invisible set of transactions happening completely outside the digital net, that is astronomically high.
Oh, I see.
So the economics of the ABCD architecture strongly favor, if not outright demand, a mandate to force that remaining population inside the perimeter.
And the paper talks about 3 types of mandates. Direct mandates are pretty obvious. The government just passes a law saying you literally cannot receive your tax refund or your Social Security unless you use a biometric CBDC wallet.
Right, that's the heavy-handed approach.
But indirect mandates are trickier. That's making alternatives legally risky, like slapping massive anti-money laundering reporting requirements on anyone using physical cash.
Making it a huge headache to not comply.
Yeah. And then there are soft mandates.
Soft mandates are perhaps the most insidious, honestly, because they don't even require new laws. It's just the private sector adjusting to the new infrastructure.
Like businesses just choosing to stop accepting cash.
Exactly. They stop accepting cash because the insurance is too high, or their bank charges them a premium to handle physical currency. Eventually, the friction of operating outside the ABCD system becomes so incredibly high that ordinary people are just squeezed into compliance through sheer exhaustion.
But not everyone gets squeezed.
Right. Not of that
Because
many.
the whole paper centers entirely on the people who refuse to be squeezed. This group he calls the resistant remnant.
Right. And Williams is careful to clarify that resistant remnant is used purely descriptively here. He strips away any religious or eschatological connotations that phrase sometimes carries.
Right, it's not about the end of the world.
No, it's simply an alliterative label for the population that declines participation in the ABCD system.
I found the breakdown of who this remnant actually is to be genuinely surprising, because I tend to picture a very specific type of person when I think of someone opting out of the financial system.
Who do you picture?
I don't know, maybe a hardcore crypto-anarchist or some off-grid homesteader out in the woods. But the paper outlines 5 completely distinct, heterogeneous motivations for why someone might refuse to participate.
The diversity of the remnant is actually its defining characteristic. The first category he lists is theological refusal.
Okay, so that would be religious grounds.
Right. These are individuals or entire communities who believe participating in such a comprehensive surveillance and control system violates a core religious obligation or doctrine.
Like certain Amish communities, or people who view biometric financial markers through the lens of biblical prophecy.
Exactly. The second category is ideological refusal. This encompasses your libertarians, agorists, and cypherpunks.
So their refusal is more philosophical.
Yeah, it's based on a deep commitment to individual liberty, free markets, or decentralized protocols. Third, we have privacy-based refusal.
Now, these aren't necessarily political radicals, right?
Not at all. They're just everyday citizens who fundamentally believe that the transactional surveillance implicit in an ABCD system violates their human right to privacy. They just don't want an AI logging how much alcohol they buy or what books they read.
Okay, those first three make sense, but they are somewhat philosophical. The last two, though, are entirely practical.
Very practical. The fourth is pragmatic refusal. And this is deeply rooted in history. It includes people who calculate that the formal system imposes more costs than benefits on them.
Like when governments start seizing assets.
Right. We see this historically when populations try to avoid crippling capital controls, hyperinflation, or arbitrary currency confiscations by their governments. They leave the system literally just to preserve their wealth.
And the fifth category, which I think is honestly the most overlooked, is forced refusal.
Yes. Forced refusal includes the financially excluded, the technologically illiterate, or people who've simply been politically deplatformed.
So their refusal isn't voluntary at all.
Exactly. They might actually want to be in the ABCD system,
Right.
but they don't have the latest smartphone, or they live in a rural area with no stable internet, or a government agency just froze their accounts because of their political affiliations. They're simply locked out.
So if you think about the ABCD system, like an ultra-modern, fully integrated smart home, the AI manages the temperature perfectly. It automatically orders your groceries when the fridge is low, and it scans your retinas to unlock the front door.
Very convenient.
Undeniably convenient. But if the central server goes down, or the AI decides you somehow violated the terms of service, those smart doors instantly lock. You can't even get a glass of water from your own kitchen.
Right. You're trapped outside your own life.
But here's the massive paradox the author has to solve. If this resistant remnant is so incredibly diverse, I mean, we are talking Amish farmers, hardcore cypherpunks, suburban privacy advocates, and people who literally just lost their tech access, how on earth do they build a unified alternative?
They don't have a lot in common.
They don't even agree on why they're standing outside the smart home.
That is the central operational challenge he addresses. What Williams points out is that they actually don't need to share a philosophy. They don't need to like each other, and they don't need to agree on politics or religion.
So what holds them together?
They only need to share a strict set of operational requirements. Whether you are an off-grid homesteader or a cypherpunk, you both need a way to buy a bag of flour that avoids biometric authentication, avoids central bank digital ledgers, and avoids AI-mediated surveillance.
Oh, I see. The need is identical.
Exactly. You share the exact same functional needs. That shared need is the foundation of the parallel economy.
Okay, so to figure out how this highly diverse remnant might actually survive tomorrow, the paper does a massive pivot into the past. It looks at how parallel economies have survived across wildly different historical triggering conditions.
Right, the historical case studies.
And the author identifies 10 specific historical escape routes. He breaks them down into 4 conditions of emergence. Let's start with what he calls normal conditions.
This comparative historical methodology is really the bedrock of the ROPE-FEIS framework. Starting with normal conditions is vital because it proves parallel systems don't only exist in war zones or failed states. His primary example here is the Swiss WIR bank.
WIR, right?
Yes, WIR. It started way back in 1934 during the massive credit contraction of the Great Depression. Swiss businesses had goods to sell and they had demand, but there was a total lack of formal currency to facilitate the trades.
There just wasn't enough money floating around.
Right, so they created their own mutual credit network.
Right.
And what is astounding is that the WIR bank has operated continuously for over 90 years. It currently supports roughly 60,000 Swiss small and medium enterprises trading in what they call WIR francs.
Wait, I need you to translate this into plain English. A mutual credit network means what exactly? How does a WIR franc work if it's not actually backed by the Swiss government?
Think of it as a closed-loop ledger of IOUs among trusted participants.
Hmm.
Let's say you own a bakery and you need a new oven, but you don't have official Swiss francs.
Right.
In the WIR network, the oven manufacturer gives you the oven, and your account goes into negative WIR francs, while theirs goes positive.
So I'm just in debt on this specific ledger.
Right. You then clear that negative balance over time by selling your bread to other members of the network who pay you in WR francs. There is no central deposit of money anywhere. The currency is literally just the creditworthiness of the community members.
That is wild.
And mathematically, the WIR system has a proven countercyclical stabilizing effect on the Swiss economy.
What does that mean?
It means when the formal economy booms, WIR usage naturally drops. People just use normal money. But when the formal economy goes into recession and credit tightens, WIR usage spikes, which keeps businesses afloat.
That is brilliant. It's an elastic shock absorber built entirely by the private sector. The paper also mentions the Sardex network under normal conditions, which sounds similar.
Yeah, Sardex started much more recently in Sardinia in 2009, following the global financial crisis. It operates on the exact same mutual credit principle. It was specifically designed as a highly successful business-to-business network to keep local commerce moving when euro liquidity completely dried up.
It's wild to think of a parallel banking system operating out in the open in normal conditions for almost a century. But then the paper moves into the second category, stress conditions. This is where things get a bit more desperate, right?
Yeah, under stress conditions, he examines the Argentine Cueva system. Cueva literally translates to cave.
Caves, like actual caves.
No. These are informal, technically illegal foreign exchange brokers that have operated semi-openly in Argentina for over 40 years.
Okay, but why do they need them?
Because of persistent extreme capital controls and hyperinflation. The Argentine government constantly tries to artificially peg the value of the peso, and they heavily restrict citizens from buying U.S. dollars.
So if you follow the formal rules, your savings just evaporate.
Exactly. So citizens rely on the cuevas. And these aren't just guys in dark alleys. They often operate out of legitimate-looking storefronts or office buildings.
So how does a transaction work?
You walk in with your worthless pesos, and you walk out with physical U.S. dollars at the real parallel market rate. They call it the dollar blue.
But how do they not get shut down if everyone knows they're there?
The cuevas survive through a really complex mix of community trust, heavy physical security, and, frankly, bribing local officials to look the other way.
Wow. The other stress condition he looks at is the 2015 Greek capital controls.
And the Greek crisis shows how fast a parallel system can activate. In the summer of 2015, the European Central Bank squeezed Greece, and the Greek government suddenly limited cash withdrawals to just 60 euros a day.
60 euros? You can't run a business on that.
You can't. Entire supply chains completely froze. But within days, literally days, alternative networks exploded. People reverted to complex barter networks, informal foreign exchange using cash from tourists, and we actually saw some of the earliest mass adoption of cryptocurrency for everyday transactions.
So the formal system choked, and the parallel system just routed around the blockage almost instantly.
Exactly. Now, the paper gets into the really heavy stuff next. The third category is repression conditions.
And here he looks at the massive Soviet second economy. I have to say, this was my favorite part of the historical analysis.
That's fascinating.
We always picture the Soviet Union as this totally rigid, top-down command economy where everything is strictly controlled. But the author argues that the black market was basically the only thing keeping the entire country from starving.
Yeah, the Soviet shadow economy is perhaps the ultimate case study in repression-resistant architecture. It persisted for 63 years under comprehensive, often brutal state suppression.
How did it even work?
Well, the central planners in Moscow would dictate exactly how much steel a tractor factory in Omsk should get, and exactly how many tractors they had to produce. But the quotas were always wrong.
The math didn't add up.
Never. The deliveries were always late. And if a factory manager failed to meet his quota, he could literally be sent to the gulag.
So what does he do? He can't just go on Amazon and buy more steel.
No. He uses a toll catch.
A toll catch? What is that?
A toll catch was an informal procurement agent, basically a fixer. These individuals operated entirely outside the law. They cultivated massive networks of personal relationships across the entire Soviet Union.
Okay, so they were the middlemen.
Exactly. If your tractor factory was short on steel, your toll catch knew a guy at a ball bearing plant who had a surplus of steel but desperately needed timber, and he knew a lumber yard that needed a tractor.
Wow.
The toll catch would orchestrate these incredibly complex, multi-party barter deals. often falsifying official state paperwork to provide plausible deniability.
They were essentially running a massive, offline, peer-to-peer supply chain algorithm using nothing but bribes, vodka, and human relationships.
And the Soviet authorities largely tolerated it at the local level, because without the Tolkachi, the official state economy would have ground to a halt immediately. The parallel infrastructure was deeply embedded right inside the formal state arrangements.
That is just incredible. The other repression case the paper highlights is the 1933 U.S. gold confiscation.
Executive Order 6102, Franklin D. Roosevelt literally making it illegal for Americans to own gold bullion.
Right, and the penalty was what, up to 10 years in prison?
Yes, but compliance was notoriously incomplete. Citizens didn't form a violent rebellion. They simply quietly hoarded their gold.
They just buried it in the backyard.
They buried it, hid it in floorboards, or smuggled it to safe deposit boxes abroad. They sustained a parallel store of wealth, entirely invisible to the state, for 41 years until the restriction was relaxed in 1974.
41 years of maintaining a suppressed financial asset. That takes dedication.
It does. Finally, we hit the fourth category of historical examples: collapse conditions.
This is when the formal system just structurally breaks down or actively kicks you out, right?
Yes. The primary modern example here is the 2019 Lebanese banking collapse. The commercial banks in Lebanon essentially ran a state-sponsored Ponzi scheme. When it finally collapsed, they suspended all dollar withdrawals. The local currency depreciated by 95%.
So the formal banking sector essentially ceased to exist for the average citizen.
It was gone.
So how do you buy groceries if the money in your bank account is suddenly worthless and you can't even get cash out anyway?
A parallel arrangement emerged incredibly rapidly, built largely on the Lebanese diaspora. They shifted entirely to cash dollarization. If you needed money, a relative in Paris or Detroit would send it through an informal Hawala-type network.
And crypto played a role here too, right?
A huge role. We saw massive adoption of stablecoins. Those are digital cryptocurrencies pegged to the US dollar, traded peer-to-peer on smartphones. They essentially built a brand new banking system in a matter of months.
Another collapse condition the paper lists, and I found this one really fascinating because it's not a nation-state collapse, is the 2022 Canadian Trucker Emergency Economic Measures Order.
Right. And I should note, the paper treats this very neutrally, purely as a contemporary structural example. It is a prime example of targeted regulatory action triggering an immediate alternative financial response.
Because the Canadian government invoked emergency powers to freeze the bank accounts of people associated with the trucker protests, right? Without court orders.
Exactly. It was a political deplatforming.
So for those specific individuals, the formal economy literally collapsed overnight. Your debit card just stops working.
Within days, there was a documented massive shift. Because GoFundMe and formal banking were choked off, the network pivoted to physical cash networks, decentralized crypto donations, and informal mutual aid that just routed completely around the banking sector.
Showing that a highly digitized state will use the financial system as a weapon.
Yes, and that populations will immediately attempt to build parallel tracks in response.
The last two cases under structural collapse conditions are historical heavyweights. They are like the granddaddies of parallel systems.
Oh, absolutely. The Hawala system is perhaps the most important analog for the whole ROPE-FEIS framework. It originated in the 8th century along the Silk Road.
The 8th century?
Yes. It is an informal value transfer system that runs entirely on a trust-anchored network of brokers, who are known as hawaladars.
Okay, I really want you to break down how Hawala actually works, because it sounds like absolute magic to someone used to Swift transfers and wire apps. Like if I'm in New York and I want to send $10,000 to my cousin in Beirut, but I don't want to use a bank, how does Hawala do it without moving physical cash across the ocean?
Okay, so you walk into a hawaladar's office in New York, maybe it's the back of a bodega or a rug shop. You give him the $10,000 in physical cash.
Okay, so I hand over the cash.
He gives you a unique password. He then contacts a trusted fellow hawaladar in Beirut, maybe via WhatsApp or a phone call, and tells him the password and the amount.
And then what?
Your cousin walks into the Beirut shop, provides the password, and the Beirut hawaladar hands him $10,000 in local cash right out of his own till.
Wait, but the New York guy has my 10 grand and the Beirut guy's out 10 grand. How do they settle up?
They maintain running ledgers of these debts because over the course of months, money is flowing both ways, so the debts often naturally net each other out.
Okay, but what if there's an imbalance, like way more money going to Beirut than coming back?
If there is a lingering imbalance, they still don't wire the money. They settle it through trade.
Trade, like physical goods.
Yes. The New York Hawaldar might buy electronics and ship them to the Beirut Hawaldar, who then sells them on the local market to balance the ledger. Or they might use a third Hawaldar in a completely different country to triangulate the debt.
That is insane. It is a massive global clearinghouse operating without a single central bank.
Exactly. And it relies entirely on a strict honor code. If a Hawaldar cheats, he is excommunicated from the network worldwide. No one will ever deal with him again. It has survived for 12 centuries this way.
12 centuries. And the final historical case.
The 300-year-old Amish accommodation in the United States.
Right.
The Amish have systematically negotiated specific legal carve-outs from the modern state. They are exempt from Social Security, they don't use corporate insurance, and they have special provisions regarding child labor and education.
So they basically operate an electronically minimal communitarian economy right within the borders of the most technologically advanced nation on Earth.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have these 10 wildly different cases. You've got 8th century brokers, 1930s Swiss businesses, Soviet black markets, modern Lebanese crypto networks, and the Amish. It is an incredibly broad spectrum. But the paper synthesizes what they all have in common.
Yes, Williams identifies 7 recurring functional components. He calls them the functional organs of parallel system.
Like organs in a body.
Right. If you want a parallel economy to survive, it must have all 7 of these organs operating simultaneously.
Let's run through them.
First, a medium of value. You need something to actually trade, whether that's physical cash, gold bullion, a crypto stablecoin, or a WIR mutual credit unit.
Makes sense.
Second is a trust anchoring mechanism. Because without state courts to sue people for breach of contract, you need a way to trust counterparties. This is usually personal vouching, ethnic diaspora ties, or strict religious community membership.
Third, a value transfer infrastructure. You need a physical or digital way to actually move the value from person A to person B.
Right. Fourth is credit clearing, which we talked about with WIR and Hawala. You can't always settle in cash immediately, so you need a way to carry and net out debts over time.
Okay, and the fifth is a price discovery function. Now, I want to pause on price discovery for a second.
Great.
In the ABCD system, an AI just looks at a billion transactions and tells you a gallon of milk is $4.50. But how does a secret parallel network figure out what things are actually worth?
It's highly localized. In the Soviet Union, the Tolkachi knew the relative value of a ton of steel versus a ton of timber, based purely on localized scarcity and human intelligence.
They just felt out the market.
Exactly. In the Argentine cuevas, the dollar blue rate is literally discovered every single morning by a network of brokers calling each other on WhatsApp to see what the street is willing to pay today.
So price discovery in parallel systems is messy and volatile.
Highly volatile, but ultimately it is deeply reflective of actual physical supply and demand, completely stripped of state manipulation.
Okay, the sixth organ is a dispute resolution function, which relies heavily on community sanctions. We will definitely dig deep into that later.
We will. And the seventh is an interface management function. This dictates exactly how the parallel system interacts with the formal, regulated economy without getting destroyed by it.
Now, looking at all these examples, something jumped out at me. With the 2015 Greek crisis or the 2019 Lebanese collapse, the alternative systems sprang up practically overnight.
Yes, very quickly.
It's like discovering a secret, fully functional subway system under the city that was just there all along. Does the paper suggest these systems are built from scratch in a panic, or are they just activated?
This is a vital takeaway from the historical analysis. The paper is definitive on this point. The latent infrastructure almost always exists in communities before the crisis hits.
Wow. Okay.
The Greek barter networks and the Lebanese Hawala networks were built on pre-existing relationships, deep family ties, and pre-established trust. The crisis merely activates the network. It does not invent it.
That feels like a massive warning sign for anyone thinking about this.
It is a huge warning. Williams argues that this is the crucial lesson for the modern resistant remnant. If you wait until the biometric ABCD mandate is fully enforced to start figuring out who in your neighborhood you can trust to trade with, it is mathematically too late.
Because you can't build trust under a microscope.
Exactly. Trust cannot be rapidly synthesized in a high surveillance environment. The social infrastructure has to be laid down during periods of normalcy.
Okay, so armed with all this historical proof that parallel systems can work and have worked, the author transitions into the core of the paper. He provides a specific design framework, a literal blueprint for how to build an escape hatch from the ABCD system.
The ROPE-FEIS framework.
Right. It's a bulky acronym, so let's break down the first half. ROPV. Let's start with R.
R stands for resilient, and specifically repression-resistant. A successful parallel system must be designed from day one to survive selective disruption by external authorities.
Drawing from the Soviet Tolkachi and the Hawala examples, right?
Yes, the architecture must be heavily distributed.
Meaning you can't have a CEO or a headquarters?
Precisely. If you centralize the load in a single institution, you give the state a single throat to choke. They just arrest the CEO and it's over. The system also needs to blend into normal life to maintain plausible deniability.
And the paper talks about cyclical enforcement, too.
Right. Williams notes that enforcement of mandates is historically cyclical. It comes in waves. The state cracks down, gets distracted by something else, relaxes, and then cracks down again. Your system has to be engineered to survive the peak of the crackdown, not just the periods of benign neglect.
Makes total sense. O stands for open source. And this comes with a really fascinating caveat in the paper.
It does. The operational rules, the templates, the how-to manual of the system must be entirely public and open source. You want anyone in any city to be able to download the blueprint and start a node without needing permission from some central authority.
There's a catch.
A big one. While the rules are open source, the participant graph must remain completely secret and closed.
When you say participant graph, you mean the map of the people.
Exactly. Who is actually in the network. The Hawala system works exactly like this. Every financial regulator in the world knows the theoretical rules of how Hawala works. The mechanics are public knowledge.
Right. They know how the password exchange works.
But no regulator has a master list of all the active Hawaladars and their thousands of daily clients. If the participant graph becomes public, the AI surveillance layer of the ABCD system will simply map the network and dismantle it piece by piece.
So the blueprint is public, but the map of the people is closed.
Exactly.
Okay, P stands for parallel.
Parallel means the system exists alongside the ABCD system. It is not trying to overthrow or replace the mainstream economy, nor is it a completely isolated, utopian separatist movement.
Like trying to build a commune in the woods.
Right. The paper argues that complete separatism is historically incredibly rare and operationally very fragile. The goal of ROPE-FEIS is to handle core daily economic activity within the parallel structure while intentionally maintaining the ability to interact with the ABCD system at the margins for specific unavoidable purposes.
Which brings us to E, and I have to say, this is where the paper threw me completely.
E always throws people.
E stands for electronicless. The core system must be able to operate without electronics. I have to push back on this.
Ready for it.
We live in a world where blockchain technology and decentralized finance were literally invented for this exact scenario. We have spent the last 15 years talking about Bitcoin, encrypted messaging, and zero-knowledge proofs as the ultimate resistance technologies. Is the author seriously arguing that in 2026, a parallel economy has to be run on paper? Is he just throwing crypto out the window?
He anticipates exactly this pushback. And he dedicates a significant portion of the framework to defending this electronicless imperative.
So what's his defense?
He isn't banning crypto, but he is fundamentally recategorizing its role. Williams argues that cryptographic privacy infrastructures like Bitcoin, Monero, encrypted apps can only ever be an enhancement at the margins. They cannot form the structural core of the resistant remnants economy.
But why? A decentralized blockchain doesn't have a central server you can shut down.
It doesn't have a central server, but it absolutely relies on a physical infrastructure that the ABCD system completely controls.
The internet.
Yes. The state controls the internet service providers. They control the undersea cables. They control the cellular towers. They control the smart grid that provides the electricity to charge your devices.
Oh, right.
If your parallel system relies on digital ledgers to clear its daily transactions, it exists entirely at the mercy of the ABCD administrators. They don't need to break your encryption.
They just turn off the router.
They implement a targeted infrastructure denial. They cut the power to your neighborhood, or they drop all unrecognized encrypted packets at the ISP level. If they pull the plug, your entire economy instantly freezes.
Wow. That is a brutally sobering thought. It completely upends the tech utopian vision of a digital rebellion. You can have the best encryption in the world, but if they control the wire, they control you.
Furthermore, even when the power is on and the internet is working, electronic operation inherently generates metadata.
Which is just as dangerous.
Exactly. Even if the content of a transaction is shielded by a zero-knowledge proof, the metadata, the timing of the packets, the IP addresses communicating with each other, the behavioral signatures of the device identifiers, all of that is entirely visible to the AI surveillance layer.
So the AI doesn't need to know what we are trading. It just sees that my phone pings your phone every Tuesday at 4 p.m., and then a heavy encrypted packet is sent. It maps the participant graph just from our metadata shadows.
Yes. Therefore, a true repression-resistant core must be built on a substrate that cannot be mapped from a satellite or turned off with a server switch.
Meaning paper.
It must rely on paper ledgers, physical tokens, or trusted human-to-human accounting, just like the 12th century Hawala system or the original WIR bank in 1934.
So it's not that crypto is bad, it's just fragile.
The paper suggests you can absolutely use crypto when the power is on and the network environment is permissive, but the core system architecture must be designed so it does not collapse when the electronics fail.
It's the difference between a system that uses a computer and a system that requires a computer.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's ROPE, resilient, open source, parallel electronicless. That is the philosophy of the architecture. Now, for the second half of the acronym, FEIS. This is the application.
Right, the mechanics.
We have our resilient paper-based system. But what does it actually do? How does it function on a Tuesday when you just need to buy groceries or get your roof fixed? Let's start with F.
F stands for financial functions. Using Robert Merton's classic economic definition of a financial system, Williams asserts the parallel arrangement must perform specific, concrete duties on a community scale.
So it has to act like a real economy.
Right. First, it needs to handle payments and settlement, actually moving value for goods. Second, it needs to pool funds.
Like insurance.
Similar. But Williams notes that due to the localized scale, this looks much more like historic mutual aid societies or fraternal orders than modern corporate insurance.
What's the difference?
It's a community pool to rebuild a barn that burns down or cover a medical emergency, rather than complex actuarial risk tables. Third, it needs intertemporal transfer.
Okay, in English you mean borrowing against the future, like getting a mortgage or a business loan.
Yes. Credit and saving. The ability to shift purchasing power forward or backward in time. And fourth, it must resolve incentive problems.
What does that mean in a parallel system?
In the formal economy, if someone breaches a contract, you take them to court. In an electronicless parallel system, incentive problems are resolved primarily via trust network sanctions. If you cheat the system, your community reputation is ruined.
Okay, so you can pay for things, borrow, save, and pool risk. E is for economic functions.
Economic functions involve the actual matching of supply and demand. In the ABCD system, an algorithm perfectly matches a buyer and a seller across the globe instantly.
Right.
Without a global internet, how do you know who in your county is selling eggs and who needs a plumber?
So how do they do it?
The paper points to historical low-tech workarounds. Physical bulletin boards in trusted community centers, printed physical catalogs distributed locally, or community auctions like the Amish use extensively.
You don't need a sophisticated digital marketplace to match supply and demand. You just need a reliable, secure way for counterparties to discover one another offline.
Exactly. It's slower, but it works.
Which is literally how humanity did business for thousands of years before 1995. It's totally viable, just slower. Okay, I stands for interoperable.
Interoperability is a matter of sheer survival. No single parallel node, say a localized community of 500 people, can produce absolutely everything it needs to survive in the modern world.
Right, you can't make everything in-house.
Your local group might have plenty of food and lumber, but absolutely no access to antibiotics, specialized medical equipment, or gasoline. Therefore, nodes must be able to connect and trade with other parallel nodes.
But there's a bigger challenge, right?
Yes. Far more challenging, they must be able to interoperate with the ABCD system itself.
And S just stands for system, meaning you can't pick and choose these elements. They must be integrated into a coherent whole. But I want to go back to that interoperable piece, the boundary interface with the ABCD system.
Okay, the interface.
If the whole point is that the ABCD system requires 95% compliance, uses AI, and tracks everything biometrically, how do you interface with it without getting everyone in your secret paper-based network flagged?
This is a crucial point. The paper introduces a highly specialized role for this, called the interface broker.
Interface broker?
Yes. These are designated, highly trusted individuals within the parallel community who handle all external transactions.
So the community doesn't interact directly.
Right. If the parallel community needs to buy a piece of heavy machinery from the formal economy or pay local property taxes to the state, they don't all individually interact with the ABCD system. The interface broker handles it on their behalf.
It sounds like a submarine extending a periscope. The massive hull stays hidden in the depths, and only one small, highly engineered piece breaks the surface to look around and interact.
That is an excellent analogy. The goal is to radically minimize the surveillance surface area. The ABCD AI system just sees one individual, the interface broker, conducting high volumes of seemingly compliant business.
It doesn't see the 500 people behind them.
Exactly. It doesn't see a diffused network of 500 people engaging in non-compliant parallel behavior.
But wait, isn't that interface broker taking on an immense, almost suicidal amount of risk? They become the single point of failure. They are the ones whose retinas are getting scanned, whose bank accounts are interacting with the programmable CBDC. If the state decides to crack down, the periscope gets chopped off.
The author totally agrees that this is an incredibly vulnerable, highly stressful position. Historical precedents show exactly this dynamic.
So they just have to bear the burden.
Yes. The boundary roles are operationally specialized and require immense psychological fortitude and careful legal navigation. The interface broker has to be someone who can speak the language of the formal system fluently.
And pay the taxes, maintain the licenses.
Right, comply with its minimum legal requirements, and yet remain totally ideologically loyal to the parallel community, which segues perfectly into the practical realities of how a community actually builds and staffs this architecture.
Right.
Moving from theory to practice, let's say you, the listener, want to start building a ROPE-FEIS community right now in your city or your rural county. What did the blueprint say you actually need?
Well, let's talk scale first.
Yeah, because Dunbar's number has to come into play here, right? The idea that humans can only maintain about 150 stable social relationships.
Scale is absolutely critical. The paper estimates that a minimum viable configuration requires about 50 active participating households. Anything smaller than that, and you simply don't have enough internal economic diversity to sustain a localized economy.
You don't have enough skills in the pool.
Right. The optimum operational range is between 200 and 5,000 participants.
And what happens if you are wildly successful and get 10,000 people?
Williams notes that once a single node grows beyond roughly 5,000 people, the trust network begins to fray catastrophically.
Because you just don't know everyone anymore. Exactly.
Yeah.
People no longer know each other, even by 2 degrees of separation. Reputation ceases to be an effective deterrent because anonymity creeps back in. So the rule is to scale by multiplication, not by addition.
So you split the group.
Yes. A system that hits 5,000 members should intentionally split into 2 distinct systems of 2,500 and then interoperate at their boundaries.
Okay, so to run this community of, say, 1,000 people, the paper identifies 7 specific necessary roles that have to be filled by trusted individuals.
Let's run through them. You need the convener, the charismatic or organizational leader who actually does the hard work of starting it.
Okay.
You need the registrar, the person who securely keeps the paper ledgers, and the highly classified participant directory.
The map keeper.
Right. The clearinghouse coordinator, the person who manages the periodic netting and settling of mutual credit debts. The interface broker, as we just discussed, handling the outside world. The strategic adapter, someone constantly watching the political and regulatory landscape to adjust the community's operating rules. And then you have the dispute referee and, crucially, the community discipline keeper.
I really want to stop on those last 2. Every system has internal failures. The paper lists 4 specific internal failure modes.
Right, free riding is a big one.
Free riding, where people consume community resources without producing. Then there's operational fraud, like literally forging the paper ledger.
Concentration of power, too.
Right, which the paper says is mitigated by strict term limits for all these roles. And finally, operational drift, where the community just gets lazy and slowly abandons its electronicless principles out of convenience.
All real threats to the system.
And to stop those, you need the community discipline keeper. But I have a serious problem with this. If I'm the discipline keeper, what am I actually doing? Am I a bouncer?
It's a tough job.
If a member takes out a huge mutual credit loan to build a shed and then refuses to pay it back, we can't take them to small claims court. Doing that means interacting with the formal legal system and exposing the entire secret ledger to the ABCD administrators. So how do you actually enforce the rules without police?
The paper is unflinching about this. You enforce them through reputation and access denial. The entire framework relies on reputation as the ultimate collateral.
But wait, social exile, that sounds like a cult. If I default on a loan, my entire community just stops talking to me and I starve. Isn't that just replacing an AI-driven digital panopticon with an oppressive, hyper-judgmental physical one?
That is the most common critique of parallel systems, and Williams addresses it head-on. He points to the historical reality of the Argentine cuevas and the 12th century Hawala system.
How do they handle it?
There are no formal courts. If you default on a debt or you commit fraud, you are simply exiled from the economic network. No one will trade with you, no one will extend you credit, no one will sell you flour.
That is intense.
In an electronicless parallel world where you have opted out of the state system, your reputation is your literal currency.
It's a harsh reality.
It is brutal, yes. But historically, without strict, uncompromising community sanctions, alternative systems collapse from within, almost immediately due to freeway problems.
So the discipline keeper is the one making those calls.
The community discipline keeper is the person who administers those trust network sanctions. You are choosing the rigid social accountability of a small village over the algorithmic accountability of a global AI. That is the fundamental trade-off of the ROPE-FEIS framework.
Let's talk about the actual current legal status of doing this right now in the United States. Is it illegal to just start a paper ledger and trade with my neighbors?
The paper provides a summary of the current U.S. legal landscape, offering it as an observation, of course, not legal advice. Generally speaking, mutual credit is permitted.
Okay, that's good.
However, the IRS strictly considers barter and mutual credit transactions as taxable events at fair market value. So if you trade plumbing services for beef, the IRS expects you to declare the dollar value of that trade.
Which creates massive record-keeping and compliance obligations for the interface broker.
Exactly. It's a huge burden.
What about using physical cash?
Physical cash is currently permitted with no federal upper limit for transactions between private, non-business parties. However, businesses have strict Bank Secrecy Act requirements to report cash transactions over $10,000.
And what about acting like a Hawala broker?
Informal value transfer is mostly legal if it is purely non-commercial, localized, and community-based.
But if you scale it?
The moment you scale it up, charge a fee, or operate it like a regular business, you fall under incredibly heavy federal and state restrictions. You would be classified as a money services business, or MSB.
And what does that mean?
It means requiring expensive licensing, massive KYC compliance, and regular audits by regulators.
So currently, building a ROPE-FEIS is a bit of a gray area. It's largely permissible if you stay small, private, and pay your taxes.
For now, yes.
But if this resistant remnant actually organizes, builds these communities, and starts pulling millions of people out of the formal economy, the ABCD administrators aren't just going to sit back and watch their 95% mandate fail. What happens when the two systems inevitably collide?
Williams predicts a specific four-phase trajectory for this macroeconomic clash. Phase 1 is pre-mandate.
That is where we are right now.
Exactly. The ABCD architecture is being assembled, CBDCs are piloted, AI is deployed, but it is not yet strictly enforced. Phase 2 is rollout, where the state uses soft and indirect mandates to gently herd the population into the system.
And then Phase 3?
Phase 3 is mandate intensification. This is the period of direct, often hostile conflict. And Phase 4 is the steady-state equilibrium.
Let's look at that Phase 3 clash. During mandate intensification, what weapons does the ABCD system use to try and crush the parallel paper economy?
The paper anticipates aggressive, specific anti-circumvention legislation. If a ROPE-FEIS network is surviving on physical cash, we should expect a drastic legislative lowering of cash transaction limits.
Like outlawing cash transactions over $500?
Or outright prohibitions on using cash for major assets like real estate or used cars.
Squeezing the oxygen out of the room?
Exactly. We should also expect the radical expansion of Know Your Customer, or KYC, rules. They will extend these rules to cover peer-to-peer digital apps, prepaid gift cards, and even physical precious metals dealers.
Basically monitoring every tiny avenue of value.
Yes. The government will likely expand the definition of money services businesses specifically to force these informal community mutual credit networks under federal regulatory umbrellas, making them illegal by default.
And what about the leaders of these networks?
Most aggressively, we will see the targeted financial deplatforming of anyone identified as a convener or interface broker for a parallel network.
So they will try to squeeze the legal operating space until the parallel economy is completely suffocated. But the paper makes a bold claim here. It claims the state won't succeed in totally eradicating it. It predicts a Phase 4, a steady state equilibrium.
Yes. Based on the historical resilience of the Soviet shadow economy and the Amish accommodation, Williams predicts the ABCD system will never achieve its desired 100% adoption.
The crackdown will fail.
It will fail to penetrate the most dedicated networks. He estimates the formal system will likely asymptote at roughly 65 to 70% of the economically active population.
And the rest?
The remaining 25 to 30% will form the permanent, steady-state resistant remnant operating indefinitely in the parallel ROPE-FEIS framework.
I just marvel at that Phase 4 prediction because it defies every narrative we have about the future. The endgame isn't a dystopian sci-fi movie where the scrappy rebels blow up the central server and overthrow the evil digital empire, nor is it a Borg-like scenario of total inescapable assimilation. It's a permanent bureaucratic stalemate, a two-tier society. You either live in the sleek, ultra-convenient, highly surveilled panopticon, or you live in the gritty, reputation-based, paper ledger shadow world.
That is the ultimate lesson history teaches us about financial repression. It's not a temporary glitch. This bifurcated two-tier system is the long-term equilibrium of any total mandate.
The systems just learn to live with each other.
Right. The WIR Bank didn't overthrow the Swiss banking system. It just exists alongside it, smoothing out its failures. The Soviet shadow economy didn't overthrow communism. It just made daily life survivable until the macro regime fell under its own weight decades later. The two tiers simply learned to coexist in a state of quiet friction.
Given that reality, the paper concludes with direct recommendations for 4 specific groups of people navigating this transition. Let's hear them.
First, he addresses the ABCD administrators, the central bankers, the politicians, the tech CEOs. Williams advises them to accept that the remnant will exist.
Don't fight it to the death.
Exactly. Trying to crush them completely with heavy-handed Phase 3 tactics will only cause massive, destabilizing collateral damage to the broader society. He suggests they look to the Amish accommodation legal precedent as a guide for how a modern high-tech state can safely tolerate a non-compliant, low-tech subculture without threatening the core system.
Second, he addresses the remnant itself.
To the remnant. Build your systems now. Lay the social and operational groundwork on existing community trust networks while you are still in Phase 1. Do it before Phase 3 regulations make it infinitely harder or legally perilous to organize a simple ledger.
Build the lifeboat before the ship even hits the iceberg. Third is for the interface brokers.
To the compliance officers, the attorneys, the designated boundary crossers who will act as interface brokers. Prepare for your job to become highly contested, legally dangerous, and incredibly complex. You are essentially the diplomats in a new financial Cold War.
And fourth, to ordinary citizens.
Even if you have absolutely no intention of joining the remnant and you love the convenience of the ABCD system, you need to become financially literate in both systems.
Why, if you're staying in the main one?
Because the bifurcation will affect the broader economy. Supply chains will cross the boundary, and you need to be able to navigate the friction between the two tiers to protect yourself.
What an incredible journey. To synthesize all of this for you, the listener, we've gone from looking at the imposing, all-encompassing ABCD system of AI and biometrics down through the gritty history of 10 different escape routes that humanity has used in the past.
From Soviet fixers to Lebanese hawaladars.
Exactly. We've mapped out the ROPE principles, the absolute necessity of making a system resilient, open source, parallel, and most controversially, electronicless. We've explored the effete economic functions and the messy interpersonal reality of how to actually implement this with 50 to 5,000 people using pure reputation and the threat of social exile as currency.
And we've peeked over the horizon at the impending legislative clash and the permanent two-tier society that waits on the other side.
It is a meticulously researched, comprehensive blueprint for survival in an age of absolute digital control. And it serves as a stark reminder to you. Whether you prize the friction-free, perfectly tailored convenience of the ABCD walled garden, or you value the rugged, paper-based privacy of the ROPE-FEIS shattered world, this architectural transition is happening right now.
The architecture is being built around you, whether you acknowledge it or not.
And eventually, you will have to decide how you're going to navigate the boundary between the two. Which leaves me with a final lingering thought, one that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the paper, but feels entirely inevitable after reading it.
What's that?
If the world truly splits into this 70-30 equilibrium, the most powerful, lucrative, and dangerous individuals in the late 21st century won't be the AI billionaires in Silicon Valley. And it won't be the hardcore cypherpunk rebels living off the grid either.
It will be the interface brokers.
It will be the interface brokers, the modern-day smugglers of the digital age. They will be the bilingual mediators, the only people capable of walking the razor's edge between total algorithmic surveillance and total paper invisibility. When the doors of the digital smart home inevitably lock, they're the only ones holding the physical key. Which side of the line will you stand on?